Good. So welcome everyone to the Triangle Sisters in Crime, Learn from the Best virtual workshop. My name is Pamela Raymond. I am the program chair for the Triangle Sisters in Crime. And I want to go ahead and just welcome all of you. We've got a full day of amazing speakers. You know, please have your notebooks and pens ready because you're going to want to take notes and, you know, catch all of the information that you can from these amazing speakers. So to help you have a better experience, going to walk you through a couple of settings. I mean, we use Zoom daily for my work. But for those of you who don't maybe always use it, just make sure that you look at the top of the screen. If you move your cursor, you'll have a drop-down box for view options. And you want to click on side-by-side mode. And that way, when there's a speaker speaking, you can see their presentation and you can see them. And that way you're not seeing a lot of extra stuff on the screen. If you've got questions, okay, someone's saying they cannot hear me. Sarah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can other people hear Pamela?
Yeah, if anyone can send up a little signal, can you hear me talking? Yes, okay, good. Okay. So Nora, I'm not sure what's going on, but check your actual settings for your computer and see what those look like. So continuing, put your questions in the chat. Yeah, make sure you're not on mute, Nora. If you've got questions, put them in the chat. We're going to use the last 10 minutes of the presentation time to go ahead and go through those questions. And then also, I think, oh, and then if you have questions, make sure that where it says to, there should be a toggle drop down that should say all panelists and attendees as an option. That way everyone can see the question, because you may not be the only one who has that question. And that way everyone can see it, and that way we know that it's been addressed by someone. So put that in all panelists and attendees. And I think that's it. I think that's all of my technical advice I can give you for today. So I'm going to turn this over to Sarah Johnson, who has been an incredible president for Triangle Sisters in Crime. So take it away, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Boy, what would we do without you? So welcome, everyone. This is so exciting. We have people from the West Coast, in the middle of the country, here in the East Coast. We are so excited to have you here. As Pamela said, I'm Sarah Johnson, president of Triangle Sisters in Crime. And there will be some of you who are not familiar with Sisters in Crime, so I'll tell you about us. Sisters in Crime is an organization that was founded in 1986 to promote the ongoing advancement, recognition, and development of women crime writers. But Sisters in Crime welcomes everyone as a sibling, anyone who loves crime fiction. There are more than 60 chapters. Our chapter, we are called the Triangle, and that stands for Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill, but we are from all over. The latest two people I've had join Sisters in Crime in the Triangle, one was from Nags Head and the other was from Clayton. So holding a workshop is one way Triangle Sisters in Crime raises funds to support our fantastic programming. But during this pandemic, we decided we would not charge for the workshop, and we are so glad you guys are here. It would help, however, if you are from the Carolinas and a crime writer, if you would join us if you haven't already. It's only $18 after joining the National, which is $50, and you can, Gina, our wonderful vice president, has done some wonderful slides for us, and you can find where to join on one of the slides. Another reason to join us is we are so excited. We are doing our third anthology, Rock, Roll, and Ruin. We are doing sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Our first anthology was Tales of Lust, Love, and Longing, and it was up for an Anthony Award. Our second one was, as you can see on the screen, Tales of Need, Greed, and Dirty Deeds. That was all about addiction and drugs and obsessions. And now we're doing Rock, Roll, and Ruin. So we would love to have your submission. And we are accepting submissions from anybody from a North or South Carolina chapter or anywhere, all you people out in Los Angeles and Ohio. If you join Triangle Sisters in Crime, you can also make a submission. And there's also other perks about being a member. We did a shooting range, we have a social, we did a shoot, don't shoot simulator at the Durham police station, and those were for members only. So coming up, we have the fabulous Abby Vandiver, Phillippi Ryan, and Jaden Terrell. And I was so thrilled when they each said yes. And in between each session, go off and eat, drink, and be merry. Check out our wonderful slides, buy our presenters' books, and learn about joining Triangle Sisters in Crime. And as Pamela said, we'll save questioning for the last 10 minutes of each session. And before I introduce Abby, I just wanted to share, and this person is here today, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this, but it meant so much to me to get this email. So I got an email from somebody who registered from Texas, and this is what she said. Just wanted to send a huge thank you for including other chapters. I am in the Houston chapter, have been a member of Sisters in Crime way too many years. This is the year I've come out of grieving and going into a mostly retired status. Writing is bringing joy back big time. Having this on February 13th, the day before so many chocolate hearts will be ceremoniously devoured, is amazing and wonderful timing. Oh heck, I may even splurge on a few chocolate hearts. Being with other writers is just perfect. So thank you, you know who you are. Thank you for letting me share that. The pandemic has been brutal in just so many ways, but there are a few silver linings, and one of those is being together today with all of you. So I am thrilled to introduce Abby Vandiver. Abby is a USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and internationally best-selling author of humorous, cozy mysteries. She's a hybrid author. She's penned more than 25 self-published books and several traditionally published books with Henry Press, Penguin USA. Her Mars Origins series and Logan Dickerson Cozy Mystery series were Amazon #1 bestsellers. She's included in the sequel to the award-winning Obama Inheritance anthology, The Faking of the President, that was 3 Room Press. And she writes as Abby Collette as well, and has written an #Own Voice Cozy series, an Ice Cream Parlor mystery, that was Penguin Berkeley. She's a former lawyer and visiting economics professor. She writes full-time, mentors indie authors, and is the instructor of Ask Abby, an 8-part self-publishing how-to workshop. She speaks on various book and publishing topics, has been a panelist at VoucherCon and a speaker for Writers Digest annual conference. She's also a member of Sisters in Crime National, yay, and Guppy chapters. She enjoys traveling when she could and spending time with her grandchildren. Abby, we're so excited to turn our workshop over to you.
I'm not in a picture yet, so I'm not sure. I don't have video. Are we going to do video for me or?
Pamela, are we going to do video for Abby?
Yes, let me go ahead and turn on her video then. Let's see if I can do that.
We can certainly turn it back off once the slides start. That would be fine. I just want to say hello, show my face.
Yes, we'd love to see you.
You know, Abby, can you go ahead and at the bottom, there's a chat
Yeah,
button.
it won't allow me. It says that I cannot do that because the video has, that's okay. We can just get started. Maybe by the end, we can work it out when there's questions.
Yes, we'll do that. Thank you.
Okay. If we can start my first slide, please. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I can't see your faces and you can't see mine, but I usually do this presentation and it covers the screen. So it'll just be like normal. But also usually I like to have a conversational kind of presentation where you can jump in and ask questions. I see now that it's saved for the end. So be sure if anything comes up that I say that you have questions, jot them down or get them into the chat so that you won't forget. But I am also always available to other writers and readers to answer questions, just to chat. So my email, if you want to jot this down and maybe someone can put it in the chat for you, is Abby L. Vandiver, just my name, at AOL.com. So be sure to reach out if you didn't get your question in or answered, or you wanted more information from me about what we talk about today. So as noted, I've written a lot of books and that I'm a hybrid author. Most of my books are self-published. I started out self-publishing because I was sick and I couldn't go to court anymore, practice law. I couldn't do anything. I could barely get out of bed. But one thing I could do is write. So I decided to do that. And I published maybe 20 books self-published. I do my own covers and I hang out in social media groups, Facebook, Goodreads initially, now mostly on Twitter. Certainly follow me in any of those places. And then out of the blue, someone asked me, Henry Press asked me to write a book for them to publish, and that's how I became traditionally published. I didn't query, I didn't seek it out. So I have a little different story than most people, but I have taught myself about the query process in order to help other people. And then before that first traditionally published book came out, Henry Press is a small press, and they only do cozy mystery. So a lot of people don't know them. But an agent contacted me and I decided this couldn't be real. Agents don't reach out to other people. You have to query, get rejected, send manuscripts in. But she contacted me and asked, could she be my agent? And that's how I became agented and got my first deal with Penguin. I also recently got a deal with Lake Union. It's for women's fiction. Lake Union is an imprint of Amazon. So I'm really excited about that. It's a different genre for me. So we'll see how I do. I'm not sure about that. Keep your fingers crossed for me. Next slide, please. I'm not going to be in control of my slides today, so you'll hear me say that often to ask for the next slide. And usually at this point, I ask what you're working on. So mentally, send me some vibes or think about what you're working on, because it's important when you're writing diverse characters to have a reason, to have the correct reason, I guess I should say, to include these. Not politically correct, but as we'll talk about today, motivationally correct. What's your motivation? It should be because it's representative of the world and representation matters. That is what I hope to get across to you today. So I want you to think about what you're working on, in what sense that do you want to add diversity to your work? Why you are here? Is it because you're nervous about adding diversity? You just want to make sure you get it right. Someone told you didn't have it right. You're not sure how to do it. Think about those things as well as we go through the day. Next slide, please. So diverse characters are marginalized groups, exist nearly everywhere. Diverse characters, you may also hear them called marginalized characters, and they are groups that exist nearly everywhere. They are people, for whatever reason, are denied involvement in mainstream economic, political, cultural, and social activities. I've heard it said for a long time that there wasn't, you can't see me, but you saw my picture, I'm Black, that publishers didn't think Black people read. So it was okay not to have Black writers published, and it was okay for others, whites, to write about Blacks or Asian or whatever, because they could write it better, or their audiences was wider and it was a better investment. But marginalized groups are everywhere. They include minorities, as I just talked about, Blacks, Asians, and even though Asians are probably the most populated on this earth, they're still considered a minority in a lot of places. It includes women, LGBTQT, non-Christians, and again, Christians could squarely fit into the definition of marginalized all throughout history. They fit this definition here. They're denied involvement in mainstream economic. So basically, anyone that's not a white male is a marginalized person. So that leaves you open, to add all kinds of characters to include them. You probably won't have, if you're a woman, and I know this is Sisters in Crime, but we do have some Misters in Crime as well. I'm not sure if any are here today, but certainly if you're a woman, you already know how to write about another woman. So you wouldn't have that problem. But there are things that can help you write these characters. Next slide, please. So as I said, only recently there has been awareness of writing about people other than you. As Mark Twain said, you should write what you know. And that seems like an easy enough thing to do. I just said, if you're a woman, that's a marginalized group, it should be easy enough to write about another woman. Next slide, please. But as writers, we're creative, right? Our mind is always going, you hear a conversation in the booth next to you at the restaurant, or a situation, and you think, I could write about that. Or I wonder what's going to happen after they leave. Your mind is always going, something that you could throw into a story. How many times have you said something happens and you go, well, I should write a book about that? I say that all the time, because it would make a good book. What's better than life itself to base your book on? And writing what you know, though, can limit your imagination. If we only write what we know, it can limit our imagination. It can limit our craft, or what we do, what we write about. It limits your intellect to go beyond what you know, and it makes your writing you're a prisoner of your own experience. You don't want to be limited. You don't want to only write the things that you have experienced. Yes, in our lifetime, we have experienced a lot of things, but how many times can you write just your limited experience in your books? Or how limited does that make your work? You don't want to do that. So we don't want to limit ourselves, do we? No. So next slide, please. So what should you do? Should you write what you like instead of what you know? Because that way you can be creative. You go beyond your intellect. And you can put in fascinating things and make up stories that go beyond, or, that are indulge your imagination. So writing what you like, though, probably is not the right thing to do, because what you know, what you've seen, and what you've heard may not be right the way it really is. I used to be a lawyer, and one thing we were taught is that eyewitnesses are not reliable. So just because you've seen something or heard something doesn't mean it's right. That's how things become stereotypical, because you've heard it said that this is the way this goes, or this is how these people are. So you may get the wrong idea from seeing or hearing these things. Then you're writing what you like because you think you know these things, and it doesn't actually work out that way. So eyewitnesses are not reliable. They don't always see what really happened. In literary terms, you might say that they are unreliable narrators. And while I love unreliable narrators, you don't want to write a book and not be in the know of what you're writing about, right? Certainly people will call you out on that. And you don't, even though our books are fiction, you want to make them believable. You want to have believable characters and situations. Even if you're writing fantasy or sci-fi, you want your work to be believable. So as we'll see, that can get you into all kind of trouble by writing what you like. Plus, we write books, at least that's our goal. And so we have to remember, the next slide, please, that one must always be careful of books and what is inside them. For words have power to change us. This is a quote by Cassandra Clare. So, you know, we've heard in history how books are banned or burned, and that's because the ideas inside of them maybe not bad at all, but they get people to think. They get people to want to change things, to do different things. And if that information inside those books are incorrect, and in this case, it's about the diversity of characters, then that leads other people to think those things, to think that perhaps they're true, even if they're fiction. When you read a book, you get lost inside that book, and you think that these people act like this. Even if it's a romance book, you may get angry at one of them when they have an argument over something silly and say, oh, I would never argue about that. Or they may have a romantic dinner and you think, oh, I want to do that with my significant other. I'm going to get some roses. So sometimes things that you read in book, you know, they have you to think and act and react in certain ways in the real world. Next slide, please. So then what should we write when we want to write diverse characters? We should write literature that reflects and honors the lives of others. We should write literature that helps to get a sense of oneself. We should write books and narratives that promote respect and empathy for all types of people. And we should create inclusive fiction with characters that come from different identities. It's important to portray the real world in your stories. As I said, even if you're writing sci-fi or fantasy, your world should be real to your reader. Isn't that what we do anyways? Make our stories believable, we make them real. Even if you're, as I said, writing sci-fi or made up things, you want it to be believable. Next slide, please. So to do this, you write what you know, certainly. You bring your experiences into your writing, and you bring your voice into your writing, right? Most people that read my book, that know me books and they know me personally, they always say, Abby, it's almost like I can hear you talking, you know? I hear your voice in your words. So you write what you know, and you bring that from your experience. You write what you like. You decide what it is that you'd like to write about, but know what you write, right? That's the important thing. Whatever it is you're writing because you think you know it, or because that's what you'd like to write, know what that is. That is so important. Next slide, please. So when it comes to writing diversity, excuse me, how do you make sure that you get it right? Next slide. In my opinion, there are 3 ways to do that. This is my opinion, and this is how I always teach this class. There may be other things that you may think of, but this is what I feel like 3 ways to get it right. You have to determine your motivation for wanting to write a character that is different from you. You don't want to put an Asian person in just because the person is a math whiz, you know? That shouldn't be your motivation, that you feel your character has to be defined by their ethnicity, right? You want to do your research to make sure you get the other that you're writing correct. But you do research anyway when you write, right? Who doesn't? You can't, even though we write what we know too, you go and you look up things to make sure you get it right. I write murder mysteries, whodunits, and I have to always go and research my murder weapon, be it a knife. I need to know where's a good place to stab so the person dies immediately. Although I don't know that I've ever stabbed anyone in my books. I can't think of that of a time. Poison, certainly I don't know poisons. And I always say, I hope the law enforcement doesn't ever confiscate my laptop or desktop, because I'd be in a world of trouble if they didn't know I wrote books, because I'm always trying to find out what's the fastest poison to kill with. So you do your research for whatever it is. If you write historical mystery of the time period, whatever it is, you do research anyway. Why not research your characters? I researched just names for my characters. Or if I'm going to give them a certain type of personality, A1 or whatever they call it, personality, then I go and look that up. What are those traits? So that's important anyway in the book. So just take it that one step further and research the ethnicity or the culture of your characters. And then you have to build your character. Next slide, please. So why do you want to write diverse characters? There are bad motivations. Okay, sorry, I just got a note flash on my screen. Okay, I'm here. Hi, everyone. There are bad motivations and good ones. Don't do it because you're writing a bad character and you feel he needs to be Black. Or a really smart girl, as I said, and you feel like she needs to be Asian. Just don't stick it in. So I had a friend who's writing, so you just don't want to stick it in because your motivation is, I need to have diversity in my book. That's not a good motivation. I have a friend who is writing a children's book, and it's all about instruments. There are humans in it, but the main characters are instruments. And she wanted to have, I don't know which instrument, like the saxophone, be Black. But she was worried about diversity. But instruments, to me, they don't have color, they don't have culture, they don't have any kind of background. Saxophone can play in a band, it can play in a jazz band, it can play in a marching band. And so she was worried about putting diversity in things that it didn't matter, because there are no, in my eye, Black or white or Asian or LGBTQ instruments, right? So figure out your motivation and why you're doing it. And if it's not about something, if it's about dogs or if it's about instruments. I've read a book where the whole book was about dogs and their interaction. They could talk. Those kind of things, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to be motivated to do that. Just include your characters and include their personalities, and you should be fine. So you have to talk about motivation. Next slide, please. Why do you want to write a diverse character? There are bad, according to Rudine Sims Bishop, she is a children's book author and a professor here in Ohio. She taught, and I'm not sure if she's still there, at the Ohio State University. She came up with mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. How I understand this concept and the way I want to present it to you is this is how characters are reflected in your stories, right? Mirrors, the readers see reflections of themselves in the story. And that's like an own voice story. I hear people often say, especially people of marginalized groups, that when I was growing up and went to the library, I loved to read, but I never saw a story that looked like me, one that I could relate to, that had me and my family or me and my culture or heritage included in those stories. And then there are windows. Windows is the reflection of seeing other worlds. You see other worlds through a window. So then you're writing about the other and not being a part of the other. You're just writing about the other, right? And then there are sliding glass doors, and those readers enter into the other worlds and demographics, and they are a part of it. I think that's the best way to write diversity, because that's when others are writing about diversity, because that's really how the world is. Am I still here? Hello? Hello? I got a blank screen for a minute there. Can everyone hear me now and see me?
Yes,
We can hear you.
yes.
Okay, my screen just went completely black. So I don't know what happened. So my apologies. It didn't even come up that maybe I had an internet connection problem or anything. Okay, so thank you. Is this where I am here? So in book talk, I think that mirrors is an own voice kind of thing where like I write about my main characters, even though I write about other characters that are other, my main characters are always Black. During my introduction, she said that I was an own voice author. So I'm writing from my own perspective as a marginalized writer. I write about Black people, characters, and their culture. And I get dinged a lot of times for it because people aren't aware of my culture. That's why I said you should research or take note when someone says this is an own voice, that their story might not be the same as yours. An example, I say mommy. My mother died when I was 39 years old. And till the day she died, and still when I refer to her, I say mommy. It's just something a lot of Black people do. I get dinged in reviews because they say, why would an adult call their mother mommy? It's I think, a cultural thing. Probably other cultures do it as well. Maybe, I don't know. I think that the Latina X community does that. They say mommy a lot, but it was like it didn't understand that that's part of my culture. Also, a respect for elders. I don't mean that other cultures don't respect their elders, but as adults, it's, you don't talk back still. You don't, for the most part, of course, there's always people that do things that opposite. And I got dinged for that in reviews. How are you grown and you still listening to your parent or your aunt? I have one series about an aunt who raised a child, and they don't like those things. So I've had to, in the next book, write it in the reason that my characters act like this. Whereas, to someone else in my culture, I wouldn't have to explain it. They wouldn't say, why don't you talk back to your mother? Everyone knows you don't talk back to your mother, So it's not only the writing of it, but I guess the understanding of it. And so when you have your own voice, when you read a story that's an own voice, I think you have to, as a reader, give a lot more leeway into how you're thinking about how they act and how they react to other characters. So you keep that in mind, and it will help you to write your own voice story. Arguably, every writer writes in their own voice, right? Whomever you are, that's the way you write about those characters. Windows. When you write diverse characters and it's a major character in your story, the story or all of it is told through their eyes. A perfect example of this is Alex Cross. That's written by James Patterson. And in case you don't know, but I'm sure everyone knows, James Patterson is white, Alex Cross is Black. So he has created a Black character that's not his own voice. And so I see this as a mirror. He, as the writer, is looking, as the window. He, as the writer, is looking through the window at Alex Cross. He's built a whole world around him, family, children, wife. I think it's his aunt, or it's an elderly person in there too. And he's written that from, their point of view, even though it's not his own voice, right? And then there's the sliding glass doors. It's when your story depicts what's in the world and the reader can enter into that world because they're doors, right? So you can walk outside to them. And as I said, I think this is the way everyone should write. because our world that we live in is diverse. And if you're writing a story in this world, or even an alien world, I don't know any alien worlds that there's only one type of alien, or any fantasy world, there's only one type of being. There's usually a mixture of it. So I would pretty much say that in any story, there is representation of different groups. And so when you write, I believe you should write as a sliding glass doors. You should introduce all kinds of characters into your story, diverse characters with different cultural backgrounds and things, because that is a reflection of the world that we live in. So own voices is a good way to write, I think. Diverse, the mirror, I mean, the window, I don't think it's as good. And I'll talk about how people are getting dinged for that. I don't know, James Patterson got a pass. People love Alex Cross. I love those movies as well. But if you take anything away from this presentation today, I think it should be, well, one of the things, I think it should be that you write a story reflective of the world that we live in, representing the world we live in. And that would be a sliding glass door where all people are together. And so you have to learn to describe those people in this world. But that's the best way to write. Don't write as a Black person when you're not a Black person, or an own voice. You can't write an own voice about autism if you're not autistic. But you can certainly put those people into your story and write correctly about them. Next, please, next slide. So people don't even get own voices right. And that's why I say you have to be careful with whatever you do. This guy here, Kasoko Jackson, wrote a book, and he's gay and he's Black, and he wrote a book about a Black person in Kosovo in the 1990s. So an online reviewer called him out. He said initially, they called him out about his quote. His quote was, "Stories about the civil rights movement should be written by Black people. Stories of suffrage should be written by women. Ergo," he says, "stories about boys during horrific and life-changing times, like the AIDS epidemic, should be written by gay men. Why is this so hard to get?" So here he's a big advocate of own voices, doesn't think anyone should write anything other than their own voice if that person is the main character. And so he wrote a book, as I said, that was set in Kosovo in the 1990s. But then he got dinged for that. An online reviewer called him out because his book was set in war-torn Kosovo. And the critique claimed he wasn't qualified or entitled to write an own voice story about anything that happened in that time, during that time. And so his Jackson's quote came back to bite him. Yes, he according to him, he could write about Blacks. He could write about gay men, but he couldn't write about what happened in that country during the 1990s because he wasn't there. So what should he have done? He should have just set himself in there, wrote from his own voice about how he would have experienced it and not how those people there would have experienced it. What happened with him? He withdrew his book. It was canceled. His contract was canceled, and he didn't get to write that book. I don't know that people would have gave him such slack about it if he hadn't gone around, bragging about what own voices should be or what it shouldn't be. Other people who have found problems with this. One writer said they had an agent who actually asked them had they had a history of mental illness because they were trying to write a book about mental illness. Another recent controversy centers on a debut author who's a trans writer, Alina Boyden. Her upcoming YA fantasy takes place during the Mughal, I don't know how to pronounce that, Mughal Empire in the 17th century India. And so now they say she's not Indian. How can she write about that? But if you listen to that argument, how can you write about anything in the 17th century, right? How can you write historical fiction because you're not there? So my point is, learn the difference in what you can write and what you shouldn't write, or how you should incorporate that into your writing. As an own voice person, certainly you can write in 17th century India. You just put yourself in there. I always tell people, my characters take over. I give them a setting, I wind them up, and I stick them in there and see what happens. That's how you write your own voice. You wind up your character and you sit it into whatever setting you want to. Kosovo in the 1990s, 17th century India, a mental hospital. And then you see how they react to that. You don't try to write it from the perspective of a Black person, of that person that's there, a mental illness person or a real person in the 17th century. Not that you could, because you're not there, but how you would react to it, how your character reacts to being in that situation. I mean, I don't think that you'll have a problem with that. And if you've researched your character, you know how they react to different things. Because when you build a character, you build their personality, their likes, their dislikes, what their triggers are, if they're, type A personality, whatever it is. So you would know how they'd act in that situation. So own voice is hard to write when you attempt to include things that are not in your own experience. But I think you can get around that, right? So write in your own voice, put your characters wherever you like, know the setting that you're writing about and the time that you're writing about and how your character react. And I think you should be good. That's not to say that if you're Asian, your character, you should write as that Black person. I hope I made that distinction clear. Next slide, please. And then there's Janine Cummings. She's the author. You may have heard of this book, of American Dirt. She got rave reviews for this book, starred reviews from publisher Kirkus, from Publishers Weekly, from Kirkus. And if you're a writer and you know Kirkus, they never give good reviews, right? And she got a star review also from Book List. She was in the Oprah book club pick, but she got so much trouble with Latino writers because they said she took herself, she's a white woman, and she wrote as a Mexican woman, and that she didn't get it right. That her perspective of things she encountered in the book, the character encountered in the book, was from a white person's perspective, and that a true Mexican person would never have the same sensibilities that her character portrayed in the book. She tried to write an own voice story as that person. That's a difference with what I said before, in that you can take an own voice and stick them into a foreign place. She could have taken a white person and stuck her into Mexico. Then she wouldn't have gotten as much flack about it, because she wasn't trying to write in the voice of someone she wasn't. So that's the difference here. She wrote as a Mexican person in Mexico. And then she tried to react the way a Mexican person would. So there were scathing reviews about this from Mexican communities, from the Latinx communities about that. So that's what you have to be careful about. There's a difference. Don't write your character as that person from that culture, and then try to live the story through their eyes, because you don't have those experiences. But certainly you can take your own voice character, whomever that is, and set them in that same situation. She could have written about, as I said, a white character who goes to Mexico and experiences these things, because those would be from her own sensibilities, the things that she sees. Actually, one of the reviewers said that it was like she described things in Mexico like a white woman clutching her purse and clutching her pearl necklace. You know, she shouldn't have been surprised, the review said, about the different things that went on in Mexico that she was surprised about. Next slide, please. As I said, there's James Patterson. He's done a million books probably about Alex Cross. And there's no problem with him. He got a pass for that. I think it's because he started his character long before the publishing world decided that other people could write stories about themselves and that people would read them. Because if a Black person wrote a book, you know, the big thing was that Black people don't read and they wouldn't pick that book up. But James Patterson, everyone would read James Patterson. So perhaps that's the reason. Perhaps they're just good books. As I said, I enjoy the movies. I think I've only read one Alex Cross book, and they're still going strong, and you don't hear about that. So some people, they do get a pass. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about the sliding glass door, because that's the way I think that if you want to write diversity, that you should approach it. You write about the people in the room, right? You write about the people in the room with you. And when I say room, I mean in the world, in your character's world, wherever that is. You write about those people. And I think that's what most people want to write. They want to write about a world that looks like the one that we live in. Next slide, please. So now that we have our motivation, writing the world as it is, we have to do our research in order to be inclusive and to include people that are diverse, right? So you have your motivation. Why are you putting them in? You're putting them in, hopefully, because, well, your main character is an own voice kind of character, but you're putting them in. Your motivation is to be reflective of the world. Remember, I think that sliding glass doors is the best way to put diversity in your book. So that's your motivation. I want to write a book that's reflective of the entire, for everybody that's in the room. And the next thing after that, the 3 ways, remember there are 3 ways I said that you can put diversity in, figure out your motivation. The next thing is to do research, right? So in order to do research, you have to read books from diverse points of view. Isn't that how we learn anyway? From textbooks? I learn from wiki pages. My son always yells at me about Wikipedia doesn't always have it right, but I think they do. So, you know, I look up a lot of stuff on there, and I read fiction to learn about different characters or learn about the genre. So it's how we learn. So that's a good way to learn about diverse points of view. Use that same technique to learn about cultures, races, and people. Then you talk to people who identify with the character that you're writing. Write using your own experiences and not the ones you see projected. Remember, I talked about that's how stereotypical ideas get put into books, how they're passed along, you know. So you write your own experience. Don't write because someone told you, you know, every Asian person I know has a degree in mathematics. So you give your character mathematics, or every gay person that I know, they go out every Friday night to discos. Those are stereotypes. There is not anyone who you can classify with another person because of their race or ethnicity or cultural background that are the same. We are all different in this world. Certainly we have things that we do, specific to our culture. Catholics, go to mass. Muslims pray. Some of them pray 5 times a day. They pray to the east. So there are different things that a lot of them do, but you don't want to make it a stereotype. And then the next thing is you can have your book read by sensitivity readers. Now that people are doing this, they don't like to call it a sensitivity reader for it. There's another name for it, and I can't remember it because I like the name sensitivity reader. You want someone to be sensitive. You need someone who is sensitive to the things that you're writing about to say whether they're the right thing to write about or not the right thing to write about, right? For instance, in my last book, A Daily Inside Scoop, in that series, I have a person that's Jewish in my book. She owns a Chinese restaurant. And then her granddaughter is best friends with my main character. And I didn't want to be stereotypical, but I also believe that descriptions aren't just she had blonde hair and blue eyes. That's not the way you write a description of a character in a book, because that tells nothing about that character, right? So I wanted to include things in the way she acted, in the way, though it was 2 characters, in the way they acted, and the things they did, that you could know that they were Jewish. I didn't want to write, for instance, an Asian character and say that they had hooded eyes. Instead, you can write other descriptions about their personality or the things that they do to show that their diversity. So I like having a sensitivity reader, calling it a sensitivity reader, because people are so sensitive to when you get it wrong, like the Janine Cummings book, American Dirt. Mexican readers were very sensitive to the things that she wrote from the perspectives that she witnessed, that her character witnessed in the book. So those things are important. Next slide, please. So here are some don'ts. When you do your research, you have to make sure that when you research it, you don't pick up those stereotypes. I was writing a book with my writing partner. She's like my family. She's like my sister. And we were writing a book that took place in the 1960s. And she wrote one character, I wrote another character. And we put the stories together. Her character was a 15-year-old white girl, but she was a Mormon, forced to marry when she was young. And so she ran away from that. And when she ran away, she went to Chicago and became friends with the black person, this black guy, which she eventually married. But during the course of their relationship, he was a freedom rider, and she went also down south with him as part of the Freedom Riders in the 1960s. Well, my friend wrote that when her character got to the South, she walked down the street in a black neighborhood and everyone was on the porch playing banjos and waving jazz hands. And I asked, I go, is that the idea that you have of black people, that all of them play banjos and they have jazz hands? But that was her experience, right? And that's what she took as their culture. So you have to do the research to find out that those things are stereotypical. They're a stereotype, a widely held belief, and something that's oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person. So those are the things that you don't want to do. You don't want to put stereotypes in. Another thing is the cultural appropriation. These are pictures of white people who are dressed like people from other cultures. The first one, I guess, is an Indian. She has on a headdress and an Indian outfit. There's someone there with dreadlocks, which is not typically a white hairdo. There's a guy with a turban on. another one dressed as a geisha, and another one in cornrows. So don't put your character, and this all goes back to the sliding glass doors and mirror things. Don't put your character, whatever character they are, if they're Asian character, in cornrows or in an Indian headdress, a Native American headdress. Those are things that you have to be careful in your book to do. Let them be their own person, certainly. I recently read a book where there was a white person that had dreadlocks. Now, when I first read it, it kind of gave me pause, but she described this person so well with their personality, how they act. That was basically the only thing she said about that person. I knew they were white from a description she gave of something, maybe dingy skin or something. I forget what it was. So I knew this person was white and I knew they had dreadlocks. But then she didn't harp on the appearance as much as the person's actions. And I could see this person with dreadlocks. I don't know that initially this people that I pictured this character as, it wasn't cultural appropriation, but now I could see it. So I wasn't as upset about it or thinking that it was cultural appropriation. So I guess there's a way to write things but no one dresses up like an Indian. I mean, like a Native American, they just shouldn't. Or wearing the turban. I know that we have hats that are turban, but it's not when we're trying to appropriate the look or the feel of someone else's culture. Next slide, please. So then how do you create diverse characters? I'm telling you to put them in because it's reflective of the world, to research and find out about that culture before you stick that character into your book. And then the next thing I said was, then you have to write a good character. How do you create a diverse character? You have to see your characters separately from the stereotype. You know, like I said before, you had a bad person and you want to make them Black. Black people are no different than any other people except for the color of their skin. There's good people, there are bad people in every race, right? In every ethnicity. There is no certain type of people that are only bad, right? So see that person separately from the stereotype. Put the Black person in because you're trying to show it's an interracial marriage. You're trying to show how that relationship has affected the family or the community or whatever. So you have to also give them characteristics that are not necessarily what you think a Black person. So maybe you think a Black person because they're bad, quote unquote, as a big burly person, sort of like the Green Mile. You know, this person had to be bad. Look at them, they could hardly speak. Duncan, what's his name? He's passed now. I forget his full name, but I know his last name is Duncan. Big guy, bad guy, bad looking guy, not very intelligent. He must have killed these two little girls. But anyone could have fit that role. It didn't have to be a Black person. It's just a person who was out there, a vagabond, didn't have a home, that may have had that mentality. So treat your characters as individuals. Make them the person. When you create your character, make them a person first, and then you give them diversity, and then you can add things that they do during the course of the story that shows that ethnicity or that cultural background, right? If you treat them like real people in your story, then readers will see them as real too. Don't give them jazz hands and banjos, because real people aren't like that. Certainly not an entire race is not like that. So build your characters as a person. Don't build them as, this is an Asian person, so I'm going to make them these things. An Asian person can act just like, a person from India or a person from Australia. So build your character and then give them that diversity. And as you write them, let them, if you're writing a Muslim person, let them have time for prayer if that's what they do. If you're writing a Jewish person, I had my person sitting Shiva, because that's not all Jewish people do that, but that was a way that I could show my character was Jewish. She had a friend that died. They took food and she sat Shiva with them, which is, they have Shiva, if you don't know, after a person dies, you sit for 7 days and people come and sit with you. So the family mourns and sit for 7 days. I've also heard that people don't anymore sit that long, but that's something a Jewish person does. But I didn't give her any, her name is Rivka. Rivka could have been any person because I created her characteristics as just a person, and then I gave her a culture. Give your character a backstory, even if it's not included in your story. Because as I said earlier, I like to wind my characters up and sit them down in the setting and see how they react. I let my characters drive my story. Characters drive the plot, and I certainly like to do that. So if you give your character a backstory, when you wind them up and set them in the setting, how they react. If they're a quiet person and they're met with opposition, then they may not say much. They may back up. They may not try to fight through the opposition. They may try to find a way to go around it. But if you gave your person a bully kind of characteristics and they were met with opposition, what would they do? They would fight through it, because they're a fighter. So I shouldn't have said bully, but a tough person, a person who doesn't let things get them down. So if you give your character a backstory, that's going to develop their personality. And that's how you should write that character and then add on their diverseness. So your backstory for a Asian character, maybe it's an Asian American character, their backstory is that their parents both came from Asia, and that they spoke the language around the house, but she understands it, your character understands it, but doesn't ever speak the language, right? That's a backstory that may come up. She may overhear a conversation. No one knew that she spoke, maybe it was Cantonese. That's a part of your character's background that helps them not only be a real, believable, authentic character, but it also helps them in the diversity that you want to portray in your book. Choose descriptive details that you observe that don't always include race. So I wrote a short story just for this class. I don't think I included it in this slide, but that my characters, their names, I had one person that it was written on a prompt. I had my class write from a prompt. A Black man, a white man, and an Asian man walk into a bar. Write was the assignment, to write about these three people without saying that they were Black, white, and Asian, so that your reader knows that they are Black, white, and Asian. And I did the exercise with them as well, the first time I ever did this. And I gave names to my characters that probably fit their ethnicity. I think the Black man's name was Terrell, and maybe the white man's name was Colton or something like that. And the Asian's last name, I think, was Wu or something. So just from the names, without me describing them, you kind of maybe had a sense. And then there was during the course of I think it maybe wasn't even 500 words. It was a paragraph. The Black person came from the other side of the tracks and he got a scholarship to the school where the white person attended, and he didn't care what other people said, the white person. He made friends with them, and today they're still friends. And Wu had a grandmother who was ill because the Black character was a doctor and the white character was introducing the two of them. And he said, I can't come to the appointment with my grandmother tomorrow. And the doctor said, well, just send her, we'll take care of it. And he goes, not unless you speak Cantonese. So then you knew that if his grandmother spoke Cantonese and he had the last name Wu or whatever it was, that he was more than likely Asian. Coming from the other side of the tracks person and winning a scholarship to a elite school that probably was a Black person. So maybe even if you weren't sure, you had an idea of these three people in the story, just from their name, just from their backstory, and just from their conversation, from their dialogue. And not once did I mention what color their hair was, what color their eyes were, or facial features at all. And you can certainly say there is nothing wrong with saying, and he was Black. You may say African American. I don't use African American. But while you're describing your character, you said, and through the door, a Black man entered. There's nothing wrong with that either. If your motivations are correct, that he's just a character and he's reflective of the sliding doors imagery where it's just the people in the room. Because certainly if you were in a drugstore or grocery store and the door open, a Black person could come in. So it's just depictive of that. So there's nothing wrong with that. But also try to find ways to describe your characters, their diversity, and even the character in general without saying, because what does it tell you? As I said before, if you say, what does it tell you about your character if you say he had blonde hair and blue eyes? It tells you nothing about the character except for he has blonde hair and blue eyes. You don't know if he likes Chinese food or if he goes to the gym every day or if he's an overachiever. You don't know any of those things. Someone told me once that a great characterization of a character they heard was, she was the type of woman that put little hearts over her eyes. And when you read that or hear that, like I just said, doesn't it put you in the mind of a person, of a woman? You can probably see that the ink maybe is pink or purple. And maybe I picture her as a little overweight and maybe insecure because she likes to doodle and put hearts and things in. But you get a visual of that person that means more than just the color of their hair or eyes. Or a person that says she was a Slytherin who liked K-pop music. So if you read Harry Potter, I had to look this up to find out, but you know that she likes Harry Potter. She likes a certain part of Harry Potter, and K-pop music is usually for younger people. So you probably think she's a younger person. It already puts you in the idea and lets you build your own idea of how this person looks. It gives you an idea of who she is, but it also allows you as the reader to put your own spin on how this person looks and create her in your mind. And that's a good thing for readers to be able to do. And it's a good thing for writers to be able to do. It's a craft, it's something learned. I still put, they had auburn hair and hazel eyes every now and then, because I'm still trying to learn how to describe people through their personality, the way they walked into the room, the way they sat down, through their dialogue. Was it timid? Were they forceful in their dialogue? Could you tell they were very intelligent in their dialogue? So you can add diversity without specifically saying this person was this or this person was that. Next slide, please. Diversity. The second grade school teacher posed a simple enough problem to the class. There are 4 blackbirds sitting in a tree, she said. I'm just saying that the second grade teacher is a woman. I probably shouldn't make that assumption, but I am, because my second grade teacher was a woman. You take a slingshot and you shoot one of them. How many are left? So the one 7-year-old says 3. He answered with certainty. 1 subtracted from 4 leaves 3. 0 answered the second 7-year-old boy with equal certainty. If you shoot one bird, the others will fly away. So what does this mean? It means to me that backgrounds are diverse, right? So diversity doesn't just mean your ethnicity or your gender assignment or your religion. It's diversity in your background. The first little boy, he did math. So that's the first thing that came to his mind. Maybe he's the math whiz in the class. Maybe his father is a mathematician and that's the way they do things at home. When he thought about one bird wasn't there anymore and originally there was 4, now there had to be 3, right? So he's analytical. He's an analytical kind of person, and we're getting this from not even knowing how they look or what color they are. The second little boy, he has a different experience, right? Maybe he's actually seen what happens when you throw a rock or shoot a projectile at a bird, because he feels like if you shoot one bird, the other ones are going to be frightened and they are going to fly away. So his experience may be that he's actually seen that. He lives on a farm or out in the country, maybe not in the city, or maybe in the city at a park, and he's tried to throw food out to them and they all flew away. He had a different experience. He had a diverse, experience from the other person. So this is what I mean about writing about the experiences to show the diversity in your characters. Just from these 2 things, you can see that these boys had a different background from each other. Next slide, please. So here's the one. I didn't know I'd include this one, where you said teen girl who describes herself as a Slytherin and loves cake pop is a more evocative descriptor than a teenager with blonde hair and brown eyes. So that's what you should go for when you're writing your diverse characters. Go for describing the characters in a different way than we've done. And there are lots of authors that have already done this. It's not anything new. You read them and you know that person. You can see that person, even though they haven't given you a physical description. Next slide, please. So where I'm from. So this is a little poem about diversity backgrounds that I just told you about. And it just says that, sort of like the 2 7-year-olds, where you're from just makes you who you are. And we know that, right? We all know that from our own experiences, that how we were brought up, and the things that we were taught, or our experiences through our lifetime, up to this point, whatever it was, they make us who we are. I am a clothespin. I'm not going to read this one. I will have my slide presentation available to email to whomever signed up. If you'd like it, just let me know, because this one's kind of long and I see we're running short on time. What the next slide, please. Okay, so your interesting characters, you'll notice that I don't put on here appearance. So to build an interesting character, you can do age, occupation, income, education, marital status, relationships, children, siblings, languages spoken, likes and dislikes, favorite music, hobbies, strengths and weaknesses, special characteristics such as their movement, maybe they have a limp, walk with a cane, speech, laugh, things like that, favorite sayings, idiosyncrasies, birthday or sign of zodiac. I didn't know zodiac thing was back. I remember I was born in the 50s, but I was in my teenage years in the 70s, and zodiac was a big thing. And then my 12-year-old granddaughter asked me something about do people of a certain sign like certain foods? And I ask, what do you know about the zodiac? So I guess it's a thing now. But people also believe that, and it's a good way to build a character, because zodiac signs tell all about a character. You know, they say what their personality is, what they like, what they don't like. So if you ever need to build a character, you're at a loss for what this character should be, assign them a zodiac sign, look it up, and you've got a personality. And you notice I didn't put appearance in here. This is how you make a diverse character. This is what diversity is all about. You build that character, you give them these things, and then they can be whatever, have whatever cultural background you want them to have, be whatever ethnicity you want them to have, and you're not being stereotypical. You're not appropriating culture. You're not canceling culture. You're not trying to write from someone else's viewpoint. You are writing from sliding glass doors viewpoint, where you're just talking about the people in the room. Next slide, please. So writing your diverse characters, you have to understand your motivations. Are you writing as a mirror, through the mirror, and looking through the mirror, through a window, or through a sliding glass doors? You have to do your research. You learn about others' experiences, and you do your research for self-awareness to make sure that you aren't being stereotypical, to grow too as a person, to learn about other people. You have ways to describe those people, their name, their dress, their language spoken, by referencing a memory and dialogue without actually saying that they are this kind of person. Because once you assign them an ethnicity or cultural heritage or gender, then you, or sexual orientation rather, I'm sorry, then you start thinking stereotypically. You know, you start thinking, what is this person? How does this kind of person do things? How does this kind of person act to these things? What do they typically do? Don't do that. You do it the other way around. You know, you make the person who they are first, and then you say, now they're Black, because it's Black people that act like that. You know, it's gay people who act like that, right? Don't be stereotypical. Don't use cliches and tropes, and don't use cultural appropriation. So the main thing I want you to get from this too, as well, is build your character and make them believable and authentic first before you assign any kind of diversity to them. Because if you do it the opposite way, you may have a tendency to be stereotypical or to write that character wrong, you know, and not be sensitive to what you're writing. Next slide, please. So I like this poem. I will read this poem because I think it makes, I know we're at 10 minutes, so I'll read it quickly. The little black boy watched a man blow up balloons one day. When each balloon was filled, the man let each one float away. The little boy watched patiently and waved each one goodbye, and all the pretty bright balloons went drifting toward the sky. He asked the man if black balloons would go up like the rest. The man said, son, I'll blow one up and put it to the test. And when the black balloon was filled, they watched it rise and glide. It's not the color, son, he said, but what you've got inside. And that's, you know, what I just said. Make your character, make them into a believable, authentic person. And it doesn't matter what's on the outside, or it doesn't matter about their culture. And certainly then you could put those things in to make it like sliding glass door, reflective of the world that we live in. Next slide. I think that's it. Oh, the last thing is, don't worry. Write your book. Don't worry that you're not going to get it right, you know, because you're going to have other people look at it. Don't be afraid to write, you know, about the other, someone that's other than you, culturally, racially, or whatever it is. Don't be afraid to write. I think take my advice from today and you should be okay. All right, next slide. All right, so questions, if you have any.
Hi, Abby. Thank you so much. I'm going to read off some questions we've gotten so far. There might be some others that roll through while I'm asking these, but we'll get to as many as we can. The first question is from Peggy Leifert. Thank you. First of all, she thanks you for being here. What platform do you self-publish?
Amazon, only Amazon. I could do a whole talk about that. Amazon has a KDP Select where you get paid by the page reads as well as books purchased, and you make a lot more money. I make a lot more money that way. Also, it's hard to publish against across different platforms because then you have to market to Kindle readers, to Nook readers, to Apple readers, and it's hard enough to market. And that way, if someone likes your book and it's on Nook, I mean, you could tell them an Amazon Kindle app is free to download. So I only do Amazon. If you want to talk some more about that, email me or find me on social media and send me a message. But that's what I recommend.
Thank you. The next question is from Iona McBoy. How does one treat a minority as a villain or just not a nice character?
Well, first you're going to create your villain, right? And then it doesn't matter how you want them to be. Just don't think that because they're villain, they have to be some dark, devious person that people always think of, like, Asian with a long stringy mustache, or a big burly black person. Just build your villain. If you want them to be black, if you want them to be Asian, it's okay. You just build it. You don't build it from the top down by making him black and then making him a villain. You make the villain, as I said today, you make the villain and then you can make him diverse if that's what you want. But you have to think of your motivation. Why is your villain diverse? Is it because you think that this race, this person, the race that you're assigning to this person actually is villainous? They're more villainous than someone else? What's your motivation for making the villain the other? And if you can answer that question, then you should be okay writing it. As long as the answer to that isn't because that's how Black people are, or that's how Germans are, or whatever you're making that person. Think about your motivation.
From Helen Minnernite, she says, it sounds like we used to do shorthand sketches of minor characters, but many of us fell back on stereotypes for the sketch. Trend now seems to be more fully flesh out even minor characters. Do you agree with that or not?
I don't agree with that. I think the major characters are important, the most important, and really fleshed out. And then for me, at least, when I write minor characters, I'll get my character into a situation and I need someone. They're in a restaurant having this conversation with one of the other main characters, or secondary characters. And I need a waitress all of a sudden. It doesn't matter what this waitress looks like. I don't even have to describe her. I may describe that she has a lot of red hair and she sticks her pen, and it's high. She has an bouffant and it's high and she sticks a pen in it. But that I don't have to give that person a color. I don't have to give that person, I have to give her some personality. Maybe she's chewing gum or something. I have to, give a little personality to her, but I don't have to go into depth. So I don't think you have to sketch them out. Sometimes these minor characters just appear because you need them as a prop. But anyone certainly who has a bigger role, who has, they will move the plot forward. Remember, I said characters moves your plot forward. If they are part of the ones that move your plot forward, yes, then you need to sketch them out. If they are just, I need a waitress here to bring us coffee so I can spill it, or whatever you need your characters to do, then no, you don't have to sketch those characters out. And that's my opinion. But I am a pantser, if you guys know what that means. So I just write by the seat of my pants. If you're a plotter, you may need to know more about that person. So that's just my opinion.
I think this might be the last question we have time for. But could you say more about how your writing should help the reader to get a sense of oneself? And that's from Glenda Alexander.
Well, for me, I think that your voice, if you mean a sense of oneself, a sense of the writer, so I'm going to answer that question, that how does the reader get a sense of the writer? If you're saying oneself, I believe that people write in their own voice. I don't think that when people tell me I need to find my voice, I disagree with that. I think that if you just write, your voice will come out. You will write it as yourself. I met someone who writes in two different voices. She writes from a childhood perspective and from a adult perspective, two different kinds of books. And when she was telling me about her childhood story, because she based it on her childhood, her voice changed. It was more excited. It was lighter. She smiled more. So when she writes from that perspective, I would imagine, I've never read it, but I would imagine that is the voice that's translated into her story. Because even when she talks about it, her voice is different. When she talked about the adult story that she was writing, she was calmer. She wasn't as perky and smiling. She just was telling me about the story. And that's her voice. That was her voice for that. So I think your voice comes naturally. I don't think you need to find your voice. I don't think you need to create your voice. I think to have a voice, you just write. Write the way you write. I was a lawyer before, and when I was in law school, I was the teacher's assistant for legal research and writing. I got the highest grade in the class, and I became her assistant. And people used to line up for me to read their briefs. And it was one girl who, every time I read her brief, I couldn't get through it. I couldn't even get through the first page. Her name was Linda. And I go, Linda, what does this mean? What does this mean? And she'd always have to explain it to me. And I go, well, you're not going to be here to explain it to a judge when you turn this in. And I said, and whatever she would explain, I go, why don't you just write it like that? Finally, she just started writing it like she thought, instead of trying to add on, I guess, some legalese or something. And I understood it. And now Linda is this big time lawyer, writing briefs, writing motions, because she wrote in her own voice instead of trying to write in another voice. So that's what my suggestion to every writer is. Just write it however it comes out. Don't try to make it fancy. People do drafts, and so you can go back and make it fancy if you need to. Just write the way you are, in your own voice. And I think that will give your readers your voice. Don't try to be something you're not.
Thank you. So many have been commenting on how much they love your presentation. And a lot of them have a question about how the slides would be available. I think you said that they could email you, but we could also add them.
Yeah, I'll send them to you. Well, you have a copy of them. So whomever would like one, email them out.
And we could add to the website, our website, if that's okay with you.
Oh, yes, that's fine. I'm happy to share. I'm happy to talk about it. I gave you guys all my, I'm on Twitter as Abby Vandiver. Although I write as Abby Collette. Yep, there they are. Twitter, Instagram, website. That'll come right to my email if you go there. Certainly just find me. I love talking to other writers.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that those get out on our Triangle Sisters in Crime website.
Okay.
So thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah, I believe.
Wow, Abby, thank you so much. That was so fantastic. I hope you're able to read some of these chat comments that people are making. This has just been such a wonderful morning with you. So
I
everyone,
enjoyed it.
Good. Stay warm in Ohio.
Okay, I will. Bye now.
Okay, everyone. Well, we're going to take a break. Please enjoy the slides during our intermission, and I'll be back about 5 till 11. Tune in because we have Phillippi Ryan coming up with her Great Beginnings. So enjoy your break, and we'll see you all soon.
Please. Something else to take into account is which of these paths you're on. Now, I assume if you're here at a book marketing class, you probably want to be on this professional class, but I have talked to a number of writers who think they should be on the professional path, but they really just want to write for themselves and their friends and their family, but they don't feel like they can quite do that. I was at a conference, one of the first ones I ever spoke at, and we were talking about book marketing, and I noticed there was a woman in the audience getting more and more and more uncomfortable, and by the time we got to the Q&A, she looked like she was about to cry. And so she finally asked, she raised her hand, she said, "Do I have to do all this stuff?" And I said, "No, you don't have to do any of it." She said, "I just want to write." I said, "You don't have to do any of this if all you want is to sell to give or share or sell to your friends and your family, people you know. But if you want to make a career, you have to do at least some marketing consistently." And she said, "I don't think I want to. I think I really just want to write." And it was very liberating for her to realize that it was okay to still be a writer and do that. So it's possible that you might be thinking that way, but I think most of you who are here are going to be somewhere on that professional path. And so that's where I'm going to gear these slides. Next slide, please. So the first thing I'd like to do is talk about branding, because that's one of the first thing that tends to come up when I talk with other writers. And the brand is just kind of what people think of when they hear your name or when they hear about your books. And so you'll see some companies on the side, very well branded companies, and authors also have brands. You see two very well-known authors on the right. So let's just talk about Coca-Cola for a minute and pop into the chat, if you would, some of the thoughts that come to your mind when you think about Coca-Cola. What does that bring to mind for you? Is there a slogan or a trait or a quality? Refreshing. Great commercials. They do have great commercials. The real thing, fizzy, fun times, things go better with Coke. Yes, exactly. The hot summer days, ice cold Coca-Cola. Exactly. Those are all images that come to your mind when you hear Coca-Cola, and they work really hard to make sure those are the things that come to your mind. You'll notice there's some slogans in there, very memorable. Fizzy, yes. How about McDonald's? What do you think of when you hear McDonald's? Big Macs. There's some people might think of Ronald McDonald or the Hamburglar. Toys for kids. Yes. Mac anything. Yes. The most recognized symbol in the world. Yeah, I like that Mac anything. It's like McMansions, McThis, Mac that. It's really entered our modern lexicon. Family oriented, best fast food French fries. Great fries. I'm loving it. Yeah, that's one of their slogans. So immediately you see those golden arches, something comes into your mind. Same thing with Apple, same thing with Nike, and the same thing happens with authors. You look at these two different authors and they have very different books, and you think of very different things when you hear their names. So when you think about a Stephen King book, what do you know you're going to get? Horror, yes. Thrillers, horror, Sleepless Nights, Scared Silly, yes, the thrill. Afraid to Turn the Page. I remember when I first read the Salem's Lot, and I was babysitting for my little brother. I was a teenager, and I was like, "Oh, this is not so scary." And it's late at night. My parents were out on a date, and I thought, it's not a big deal. And then I turned that page where Danny Glick slides up in front of the window, and I thought, I have to find a cross. I had to go find one of these little glow-in-the-dark Bible school crosses before I could go to sleep that night. That is some powerful, scary writing there. And when you think of Stephen King, that's where you think is if you read horror, or if you don't, you think about Stephen King, you think about something scary. And that photograph of King is exactly in line with that brand that he has. It's a scary picture, the way the lighting is, the way Pennywise is behind him, his kind of thoughtful expression, all of that is right in line with his brand. And when you think of J.K. Rowling's writing, not what she writes as Galbraith, because that's a different brand. But when you think of J.K. Rowling's writing, what do you think? Do you get the same image that you do when you think about Stephen King? Magical, smart writing. Everyone please, oh, okay. Yes, everybody please make sure that on the chat, you have it going to all the panelists and attendees. Magical, yes, the Harry Potter stuff, magical. Yes, if you've seen the movies. Well, that's true. Some people only know the books and some people only know the movies and some both, but you still get that sense of what she writes about is something magical, often whimsical, can be a little bit dark, but magical and fantasy is the main thing. Peggy says, I know her backstory and all the people who ridiculed her writing, but she held on to her dream. Yes. Whimsy, YA, Hogwarts. Yes, we see all of those things. And I noticed that, Peggy, I like the way that you also mentioned the story that she has as an author. You think of those things and we form impressions of authors based on what we know of them and their stories and what they're like as well. So you as a writer have got a brand. You already actually have one. Gina, next slide, please. Because the brand is just what people think when they hear your name or when they hear about your books. So even if you don't have a book out yet, you have some kind of brand in your sphere. So if you work in an office and you know you're the go-to person and everybody's like, oh, if you need something done, take it to this person, take it to Gina. Gina will get it done. That's your brand within your author community. And if you are, you have a group of friends in the movies, you always say, oh, this is the funny one. Well, that's that person's brand. When people think of that person, they think of the funny one. So your brand is really just boils down to what people think of when they hear your name. And if you're trying to create a professional brand as a writer, now you want to think about what do you want them to think and how can you kind of lead them in that direction by how you present yourself in public. So some authors use a number of these different things. Some don't do any. Some just send their books out and people eventually come to expect certain things from them. But there are things people can do to influence their brand and to make themselves more memorable. And kind of in the modern day where everything is bite-sized, well, they try to make themselves fit in that kind of soundbite world so people can remember them easily. And one way is through a tagline. A lot of authors don't have them, but they can be very effective. Rapid Fire Fiction is by Roni Kendig, and she writes, you would guess, something to do with thrillers. And hers are actually military thrillers. So the rapid fire part is actually even more relevant to her. She writes military thrillers, and she's an Army kid. And so you go to her website and you see a lot of like military insignia and that kind of things, the military images. Endless Adventure, Timeless Truth, Jill Elizabeth Nelson. She writes suspense novels with a Christian theme, Endless Adventures, Timeless Truth. And then Janine Ippolito has, this brand particularly goes with one of her series. It's not her overarching brand tagline. It has to do with just her series, Monsters, Misfits, and Mushy Stuff. Doesn't that give you a strong image of what that might be about? Some people will brand themselves. Some people will brand a series. Some people will brand a single book, if that's all they have. Some people will brand a character if you have one character who goes across all series. And all of those are fine. You want something memorable that will make people think of the thing you want them to buy from you. Then another thing that people sometimes use, visual unity, and they may do that across their websites, all their social media, their business cards. Some don't worry about it, but it's another tool that you have that can help you come to mind immediately. Colors people use. So if you write cozy mysteries, you might want to use a different color palette than if you write dark thrillers. And you can even look in these two pictures that J.K. Rowling has a softer lighting. She has a softer background. It's kind of intricate and interesting, like her magical world, but it isn't really in your face scary like Stephen King's. And so the colors that she's wearing, you've got that bright pop of color, but also a little muted. It's a little understated, not right there in your face. There's a sense of whimsy in her facial expression. All of those things really in line with her brand. The images you use, the logos you use if you have one, the designs, they all want to be in line with the image you want to project. If you have a website, if you have cards, etc. And it can even be with the clothes you wear. Randy Rawls always wears a cowboy hat, and that's a big part of his brand. He's recognizable as an author, tall guy, cowboy hat. There's another woman who goes to all the conferences, and you'll always know her in a panel and be able to find her because she's always wearing usually a red fedora. It's how she wrote her books in coffee shops. Yeah, this picture is actually tied to her history as well, so it's relevant in a lot of ways. What you don't want to do is be recognized for something bad, something that's not good. I remember a story by some agents who talked about a lady who she wanted to attract their attention. And so what she did was dress up like a turtle. She wore a turtle costume and crawled around under the tables at the lunch times where the agents were sitting so that she could pitch her book to them. And it made an impression, but it wasn't really the one she wanted. So when you're crafting your brand, you want to think about, okay, how will the person I'm presenting myself to interpret what I'm doing here? Gina, next slide. Thank you. This is who to watch. This is who to watch for branding. She's amazing. Phillippi Ryan, you just saw her. Everything she does, if you follow her social media, if you go to her website, it all has the same sort of branding, this elegant, highly intelligent, and a sophisticated look, very smart, literary. It's all right there. And no matter which of her social media you go to, you're going to get this same sense or this same feel. She's actually really good about all of the marketing part, and we can talk about her again when we talk about social media. But she is definitely one to look at. They all have, yes, exactly, gracious and lovely. And if you look at those pictures, that's exactly what you see. And you have one that's a more serious and one that's a more fun. So you're getting both aspects of that, but it's still very unified. No matter whether she's being fun loving or anything else, she's got this exactly Marilyn casual elegance. It's beautiful. And so when you think of Hank, these are the things you think about. And I'm not saying that's not who she really is, because it is who she really is, but she also cultivates it by the images that she puts out and that she uses in the photographs and so on. They're chosen to project that image. And it's a very honest image as well. Next slide, please. So I just put Hank up as an example of how to do it perfectly. But when you start out, you're probably not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Now, Hank had years and years of practice as a television journalist, and she has lots of Emmys. So this is something that's almost like breathing to her now. We don't necessarily always start there. So don't wait until you're Hank to do this. It's never going to be perfect. We are not perfect people. We're human beings. So what you do is you start with something good, and then you get better as you grow. Now, this is a problem I used to have sometimes. I would think, well, when they would say your minimum viable product or make it good enough, and then go, like, good enough is not good enough. And I kind of interpret it in my mind as throw up some piece of crap and then make it better as you go. That's not what I'm saying here. But what I am saying is make it good and make it serviceable, and then you can add to it as you go. But next slide, please. You can't try to do everything. There are so many things you can do for marketing, and it becomes very overwhelming. And you hear everywhere. If you're like I am, you read a lot of stuff about book marketing, and you have to have a podcast, you have to have a blog, you have to have a street team, you have to do this, you have to do that. And it's like, if you did everything they told you to do, you would spend 24 hours a day doing it all, and you still couldn't do it all. And then you feel like, well, if I can't do it all, why even am I bothering? It's so overwhelming. I can't possibly succeed. I think I'll sit on the couch and eat some Oreos, because now I need comfort and I'm all stressed out in addition to being overwhelmed. So you can't do everything and you can't do perfect, but you can come up with something manageable to start with that is still professional and still functional, and move on from there. So next slide, please. I like to think of it in terms of a foundation and 4 pillars. And part of the foundation can actually be one of your pillars to start out with. So if you can boil it down to something simple, it's going to be a lot easier to grasp. You're going to feel a lot less overwhelmed, and you're going to be more likely to be consistent with it. Peggy, I'm glad the Oreos are still on the table, or the couch, as the case may be. Yes, there have to be Oreos. Next slide, please. So the foundation that you want to have in place, your website with an email list and a newsletter and some sort of reader magnet or enticement. And they can be fairly minimal as long as they're professional, or they can be very elaborate. And starting with just a website, I'll give you two as examples. You can go see CJ Box, and it's very bold, very professional imagery. You can tell that he put a lot of money into getting somebody professional to put that website together. And everything about it says, I am a best-selling thriller author. And then you have William Kent Kruger, amazing writer. Love everything he does. If you go to his website, it's pretty unassuming. It's a lot like Kent. He has a photo. He has information he needs. It looks professional. It also is, he's put it up there because he needs to have a website, and it's functional, and it does everything he needs it to do. But two very different approaches, and Kent's is valid just as much so as CJ's. It just depends on what you're looking for. CJ Box is C.J.Box, and William Kent. Thank you, Susan. Then some authors will ask if you need a website. I don't really need a website. I don't think my website really sells books. But it's important to have one because, first of all, it's real estate you own. If you build your whole career on Facebook or Twitter or one of those social medias, you're totally at their mercy. So if Mark Zuckerberg changes his algorithms, you can be out. And I know people who have been banned from Facebook for no reason that they can understand. And it's very hard to reach a human being to get them to reinstate you if they will do it anyway. So you're always at their mercy. And then what do you do? I have been on events in Facebook where they had instituted this little rule where you could only post so much per minute or per 10 minutes. And if you post more than that, suddenly you can't post anymore. So I'm in the middle of an event where readers are asking me questions and suddenly I can't answer them. So you lose some control there. And if they should, for some reason, ban your account, you're just lost. You've just lost your whole business. And social media is very valuable, but it should not be your pillar. You need a place that's your own that you can then send people to that you control. And that's what your website does for you. It also is a place where even if readers tend to look for you on social media, some of them will immediately look for your website. If I see an author I want to know more about, or if I'm doing an interview about an author, I go to their website and see first, what can I find there? I roll ridiculous. Yes. So again, you want to present yourself professionally, and a website is part of that. Journalists probably go to your website. They look at for the media line, media tab to see if they want to do a story about you. Do you have pictures there? Do you have some things that they can look at? Do you at least have a bio they can take some information from? When I was helping organize a conference and I would get requests for panelists, the first thing I would do is go see what I can find about them on their website. If I don't know them, all I know is what I can see. And if they don't even have a website, or if the website is very unprofessional, it tells me a little something about how seriously they take their career. Dog, bird, background. I do have dogs. I also have parrots, and I'm in the room with the African gray, so he's chattering a little bit because I'm talking. I hope it's not disturbing you. William is a really nice guy. So the next thing you need with your website is an email list or a newsletter. And that can be very, very elaborate, or it can be very simple. Some people have the banner, they have the the little sections of their newsletter, it looks like quite a production. And some will just periodically send an email that just looks like an email, a chatty little email. And both of those are fine. Depends on what will you do consistently. But as long as it's professional and functional, it's fine. And then you want a reader magnet or an enticement, which again can be something like an ebook. It can be the first book of you that you have for free. If you have a series, it could be a short story or novella that you've written that ties into it. Or it could be something like dossier. Mark Dawson does a dossier of his spy character, and it's got the confidential stamp on it, classified stamp on it, and it's got parts of it redacted with black boxes, and as readers love it. So just something that your readers will like in return for their email address. It used to be that just having contact with an author that you liked was enough. But now that everybody has them, it's a little bit harder to get noticed. And so sometimes it helps to have that enticement, but not all authors do. Sometimes the enticement is something as simple as sign up here for updates and contests or whatever it is that you think that they will enjoy about your email. So again, your magnet or enticement can be a big thing that's a lot of work, or it can start as something small and you can maybe add later if you want. But that email list is really important, because if you think about it, people who buy your books and love them, they buy them maybe from Amazon or Barnes and Noble or an independent bookstore. How do they know when you have a new one coming out? They're not going to tell you. I mean, Amazon's not going to send a notice usually to them that you have a new book out. They're not going to tell you, so you can announce it to them. And even readers who really love you, they have busy lives. So are they going to keep checking back periodically to see when you have a new one? You may announce it on Facebook, but what are the odds that they're going to actually be there at the time you announce it, so that it doesn't get lost in their feed by the time they go look? So the email list, having them on that email list just gives you an opportunity to let those people who have said, I really like your books, I want to know when the next one's coming out, it gives you a chance to stay in contact with them. It is good to also stay in touch with them with things that are going to be interesting to them, because if you only contact them when you have a new book, it kind of comes across as, well, she only contacts me, she only reaches out when she wants me to buy something. So you want to just send enough emails or newsletters that they remember where they heard of you and they don't feel like you're always got your hand out when you contact them. Next slide, please. So that's your foundation. And then there's 4 pillars. Let's see the next slide. That's just your graphically eye-grabbing one. I use this little mnemonics, also known as DICE. Discovery, which is when you reach out to them, it's how they discover you, go from not knowing you exist to knowing you exist. Interaction, which is when you engage with them, and when they engage with you, that's giving you permission to stay in touch or to speak to them. And conversion, which is when they decide they want to buy that thing. And then evaluation is when you decide whether what you're doing is working or not, and whether you have to adjust it. I used to say only 3 pillars, but then I realized you really need to have some way of knowing whether what you're doing is working. Maryland, Goodreads will sometimes contact readers about new books by a favorite author, but again, you're not in charge of it. Exactly. Just like people can follow you on BookBub, they can follow you on Amazon, but you have no control over that. And they may not actually open that email that day. They may not think to follow you that way. A lot of people may love your stuff, but they're not going to think to follow you on Goodreads or BookBub or Amazon. Go ahead, next slide, please. So your personal marketing plan is your foundation, your website, your email list, and your magnet or enticement. One way for people to discover you, one way to interact with them, and at least to begin with, your email list can serve that purpose for you. Your conversion elements in place. Some of them are not in your control, especially if you're traditionally published. You have no control over that. But if you want to make sure those are in place. And then some evaluation strategy, some way of keeping track of what's working and what's not. If you have multiple genres, here's somebody to look at if you have multiple genres, and that's Jenna Bennett / Jenny Bentley. And she has a series, she's USA Today bestselling author with Berkeley Prime Crime as Jenny Bentley for her do-it-yourself mysteries, but as Jenna Bennett, a name she chose because it's closely related to Jenny Bentley. It sounds kind of similar. She does kind of chick lit-ish mysteries. They're not quite cozy. They're a little bit edgier than cozy. And she does some sci-fi adventure and some various other things. And she's got them all on one website, but she kind of emphasizes their commonalities, and she's got it very clearly marked as to what's what. So she's a really good one to look at. Next slide, please. Here is how readers experience it. They discover you, they interact with you, then they decide that they love your stuff or would like to at least try your stuff. So that's the order they experience it in. However, from our side, Jenny Bentley, Bentley, and Jenna Bennett, Jennabennett. Next slide, please. We approach it from the opposite side. We want our conversion elements in place first. That's the thing that makes them want to buy. Maybe it's the advertising copy, the blurb, the good cover. Hank talked about how do we learn to read? I mean, how do we choose what to read? We see the cover, it attracts our eye. Well, all of those things in place already before you start the next step. Then you set your interaction method in place. How are you going to then talk with these people and engage with them? Is it going to be social media? Is it going to be your newsletter? What's it going to be? That needs to be in place next before you go to discovery. And once the discovery is in place and things are rolling, then you just kind of keep an eye on it and go, does it seem to be going well? Do I need to adjust anything or not? Some people, there's a question, is it better to set up a special email address to use for publicity versus private? It is more professional looking to do that. However, I know plenty of authors who don't. So again, it's a question of what kind of brand are you doing? Are you going to just a casual Gmail type or otherwise? I have a Jaden at jadenterrell.com, and I like to use that for the business part. But once I get to know somebody pretty well, I often use the Terrell at comcast.net. But when I'm first making a professional contact, I'll use the Jaden at Jaden Terrell. Yes, conversion is the thing that entices people to buy. We're going to get to the discovery and all these other things next in a little bit. So next slide, please. So here's why you do it backwards. You do it backwards because if you send a whole bunch of traffic, like they discover you and then you send them immediately to buy something, but you don't have all these elements in place. You don't have a good cover. You don't have a good blurb. You don't have good copy that's going to entice them to read your book. If that's not there, next slide, please, they will run screaming away. So you're sending traffic, audience, readers, to something they don't want. And it's not a good fit for them. And so they immediately flee. And therefore, you've just wasted all of that traffic. Next slide, please. If, however, you set up the conversion stuff first and you have a great cover and you have a great blurb and you have good copy, and if you're sending it in your newsletter and you're making an announcement about your book, if it's well written and it's enticing already, then they come to it, and next slide, please, they love it, and then they enjoy it and they're happy and they tell other people about it often. And so having that infrastructure in place already, that good solid product, that good copy that's going, the good blurb, the good copy, all that stuff. And if you send a bunch of traffic to your social media or your email list or whatever it is, and you don't have it, it's not engaging, and you've just kind of thrown it together and it's not targeted to them. And again, they're going to run. But if it is, everything is happy and they'll tell people about it and they become your fans. So you don't want to send your traffic to a place that is not prepared to handle it. And that's why you do it backwards. You set all that stuff up first, then you find people and attract people to it. Next slide, please. So we'll start with the evaluation part because it's really individual. Some people like to use spreadsheets. Some people like to just jot things down in a notebook. You can get information from your royalty statements, your Google Analytics to see how many people are coming to your website, etc. There's, for those of you who do paid advertising or want to, there's a little technological thing called a Facebook Pixel, which you can put it on your website. It will tell you what traffic is coming from Facebook. And that's all kind of technical stuff. So you don't have to do any of that. All you really have to do is go, here's one thing I did different. I did one thing different. I added something and I sold more books this month. That's enough. That's evaluation. And that will tell you whether what you're doing is working or not. Especially if you only make one big change at a time. So just having the mindset of, all right, I've got everything in place. Everything's going. Now I'm going to change one thing. And if it helps, maybe you want to do more of that thing. And if it doesn't, you don't want to do so much of it. You want to chase something else. So just having a spreadsheet where you keep track of it, or just a notebook where you keep track of it. And even if it's just, I sold this many books in January and I sold this many more in February, or I started this ad on this day, or I sent this newsletter on this day, and I've seen a result. So it doesn't have to be anything complicated, just something so that you're not trying to fly blind in the dark. Next slide, please. Conversion elements. We don't have, if you're traditionally published, we don't have much control over a lot of this stuff. But if you're indie published, you do. So the book cover, the cover copy, the book blurbs, sometimes you have some control over that. The reviews, getting reviews is good. Your Amazon page, which as an author, your Amazon page, you do have some control over. And then the sales copy that you use in the newsletter or in ads that you take, or your calls to action in your emails, those you all control. And those are other things that convince somebody to give your book a try. So when those things are in place, that's important. Now, I always say you want to have your book's metadata in place if you're indie published. If you're not, your publisher will take care of it. Even though that's technically not conversion, you do it at the same time. So that's why I put it on this slide. And we will talk about that later in some detail. So if you find it a little confusing, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it. Next slide, please. Now, we're going to talk about the interaction and discovery. And the interaction will come first because that's what we want to have in place first. A way, like, I don't want to send them here unless I have something to do with them or something to offer them. But there is some overlap between the two things, because there are some things that help you interact with the reader at the same time they help you bring new ones in. So don't be too rigid about this, but we're going to talk about the interaction part first. Next slide, please. Interaction is just how you engage with your readers. It can be social media. Social media is one way to engage with your readers. Now, social media is not very good for discovery. It's not real good for getting new readers. You might get a few that way, sharing some things or somebody else sharing something that you put up. But in terms of the sheer volume of people that you have to find to make a sale, it's not very good for that. But what it is good for is interacting with people who already like you and know you, and they want to kind of see what you have to say. Social media, I said we would get back to Hank. Hank is amazing at social media, and I highly recommend that if you don't follow her, that you do. Somebody up here, when she first showed up, somebody said, have the ducks returned yet? People love Hank's posts, and she has this whole series. Every year she and it takes people's suggestions. Like, when do you think, it's like a little lottery, but when do you think the ducks will return to my pond? And everybody is very involved in guessing when the ducks are going to come back. She tells stories about the ducks, and she also will tell stories about her little adventures as she's traveling. And she'll put a little teaser in the social media, and then you have to go to her author page or to her website in order to hear the rest of it. So she's brilliant at it. And if you have got some interest, if you've got interest in how to run social media really well, check out Hank. Flo and Eddie, she sends postcards to those of us who guess. Yeah. And she's very engaged. You see, she not only just answers them on social media, she actually sends postcards to the ones who get it right. Amy, is it anybody who guesses, or is it people who guess right? It's anybody who guesses. Yeah, that makes sense because she doesn't want to leave anybody out. So social media is one way to engage with your readers. Your email list is another way. And that's one reason it's good to have the email list, because not only does it serve the purposes we did before, it can also be engagement with your readers and interaction with your readers. Book signings, those are times when you engage with people. It's also a little bit to do with some discovery or outreach, because usually the bookstore will do some promotion, and that will bring new readers in, maybe who don't know who you are. If it sounds like it's going to be an interesting topic, sometimes new people will drop in, or other people are wandering around during the bookstore and they just happen to hear it sounds interesting and they discover you that way. So there's a little bit of discovery involved with it, but usually book signings are chances for you to interact with the readers you already have. Conferences, that is a way of interacting. Writing conferences, not so much, unless writers are your main audience, but reader conferences and conventions, certainly. And that is also, again, some discovery or outreach, because they do promotion and your name is usually on the website as an attendee. And if you're on a panel, your name is in the program. So there's a little bit of discovery in that as well. In that being there, you're going to be there to interact, but you may bring in some new readers just because they're promoting you. So now let's look at the next slide, please. When you're choosing methods of interaction or engagement, you ask yourself a few things like, have you chosen the right method for your strengths, for your weaknesses, for your preferences, for your audience? Social media, if you hate it, you're probably not going to do it very often. Blogging, if you don't have the energy to blog after you've written, might not be a good choice for you. If you hate speaking, then visiting on a podcast might not be the best choice. Now, I'm not opposed to trying some different things. In fact, I'm all for it. I have a course about this, and one of the things we do is try a bunch of different things so you can kind of see what you like and what you don't like. And sometimes you think you won't like something, and then you do it and like, oh man, I really enjoyed that. That was a rush. And then it may become one of your pillars. But you want to ask that, is this a good fit for me? If it's not, you might not be consistent about it. And even if you are, your readers or your audience are likely to pick up that you're not very enthused about it. Another question, is the content you're giving right for your audience? Are you using an engagement method that your audience uses? That's not a question on here, but I just thought of it. So if you are all about Twitter and you love Twitter, but your audience, your readers don't use Twitter, that's not going to be a very, very effective place for you to interact with them. So you have to also not only think about what do you enjoy, but also where are your readers? Where are they? And if they're all on Instagram, you're not crazy about Instagram, but that's where they are, you might want to think about dipping a toe into Instagram and look for a while, see if you can get it. What are your readers doing? What do they like? Are you being engaging? Now, being engaging might mean being charismatic. It might mean being entertaining. It might be being a great speaker, but it might just be being warm and nurturing and approachable and generous. Being engaging just means having some attractive characteristics that will draw people to you. And people love to be entertained, but they also love to be nurtured and cared about. So if you're thinking, well, I can't really be engaging because I'm not a showman, I'm not charismatic, and you don't have to be. Who are you that make people like you? Are you genuine? Are you sincere? Are you a good listener? Use those things. And are you offering them value? And you hear that a lot if you follow a lot of entrepreneurs that give them value, give them value. If you write fiction, what is the value? It's entertainment, it's comfort. There are authors who tell stories of people who said, I was in the worst time of my life. I was at the hospital and my mother was ill, and your books kept me going because they made me feel comforted, and they made me know I wasn't alone. And that's incredibly valuable. Next slide, please. And now we're going to talk about discovery, outreach, etc. There's the same thing, but I like discovery because it makes the little D in dice. And also because that's really what it's about. It's about getting readers to discover you. So once you have your conversion and interaction elements in place, now you're ready for outreach, because when you send these people someplace, now you have something to offer them. And you don't run around screaming because you just signed them up and you didn't have anything to give them in return, or the thing you are giving them is not appropriate. So discovery is just, as Tim Grahl says, getting people to move from not knowing that you exist to knowing that you exist, and hopefully intriguing them enough to take a deeper look at what you're doing and to get you to know you a little bit better. Next slide, please. There are a lot of different ways to get discovered, and here's just some that you do just yourself. One is your book's metadata, which has to do, I'm not going to get into this real deep because you don't have much control over it if you were traditionally published. And also because, like so many things here, if we talk about it too much, it will cover, we could spend the whole day talking about metadata. But essentially, it's just about the little keywords and categories that your book is put in, so that on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever they are, those websites are really search engines. And so you want to make sure that the keywords and categories that they're in are appropriate so that people who are looking at your book will find it. And this is important because back in the day, there was not so much an understanding of what these searches were. And so when I went to look at my book's metadata, my publisher had given me access to it so I could go in and make some tweaks and stuff, because I had some ideas. And the searches, the keywords they put in were things like divorce, ex-wife. There were elements that are in the book, but nobody who was looking at that book would ever put those keywords in. So I changed them to things like wisecracking private detective. That's actually a keyword phrase that they use. And like murder mystery, things like that, that people might actually be looking for if they were looking for a book like mine. And it did make a big difference. SEO, which is search engine optimization, something else you can do on your website or on your blog, just making sure that you don't want to overuse it, but you want to use the phrases again that people look for, so that all the little Google bots know when somebody types in Nashville-based detective story, I have got those words on my website so that they know my website might be a good fit for those people. Your own blog, your own podcast, your own YouTube channel, etc. You can either interview other authors there, which is a great way to be discovered. You're profiling somebody else or interviewing or spotlighting somebody else. And so there's a good chance that when you let them know that, they might share that link with their readers, and some of them will discover you that way. However, the downside of that is that it's one more thing you have to promote. So if you really love YouTubing and podcasting and blogging, that can be a great way for you to get discovered. But if you're kind of lukewarm about it, and it's hard enough to just market your books, let alone a podcast and a blog and a YouTube channel as well, you might not want your own. We'll talk about another way where you can get the benefits of that without having to run your own consistently. And then you can also, a lot of authors have success self-publishing short stories and novellas that will attract the same audience as their books. So maybe there's a prequel they write, or maybe there's a character in the books that people resonate with, and they write a little side story about that character or a novella. So that can be a way. And then in the back of those books, they have got a link to their newsletter and say, hey, if you'd like more of this, come here and get this little reader magnet. Next slide, please. Another option is to use other people's audiences. And that's what the OPA is, other people's audiences. It's cooperative. You leverage other people's readership or audiences. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Like we talked before about using self-publishing your own writing. When you publish short stories in anthologies, or you publish articles in magazines or on websites or on other people's blogs, then you're still using your writing, but you have access to their audience as well, because you're in their magazine, they're going to promote it. You're in their anthology, they're also going to help you promote it. And the other authors are all going to be promoting it. So it's still, so your writing is your other writing is a really good way of marketing your books. Recommendations from other authors. So if there's another author who has an audience that it would be a good fit for you, but maybe you don't have access to that audience, they might recommend you. As an author, Jean Raby, who's amazing, and she will do shout outs to other authors in her newsletters. And I've gotten some readers as a result of kind things that she said about me in her newsletter. You can also do, all right, say email or newsletter swaps. These are great. You have to be careful with them. You're not swapping email addresses. You're not giving that other person your readers. What you're doing is sharing that other person with your readers. And then they in turn are going to share you with their readers. So let's say Gina and I are both authors who had the same audience. Then I would go, Gina, well, we have the same audience, but our mailing lists are a lot different. So I say, Gina, I've got 300 people on my email list and you've got 300 people-ish. Why don't I tell my readers all about you and do a review of your book and tell them how much I love them, and then you do the same. And that way, some of her readers will want to read my books and some of mine will want to read hers. And some will sign up for my email list and some of mine might sign up for hers. So that's a good way to do it too. And you pick people who you either know really well or people who are kind of in a similar area from you. Like if you have 100 people on your list, you might not want to approach somebody with 10,000 unless they know you really well and they've offered to help you out that way. But somebody who's kind of comparable or just a little bit fewer readers or a little bit more can be great choices. Blog tours, I think we talked about that already a little bit. It's like you get the advantage of the blog, but you also don't have to market your blog all the time or attract people to your blog. You do share it with other people, but you're getting the advantage of their audience that they've already built. And of course, you want to give them, if you decide to do this, you want to give them value for their readers. You want something their audience will enjoy. And so that helps you, it helps them because they've got new content for their blog and it helps their readers. So it's symbiotic and it's awesome. Speaking engagements are a great way to have discovery using somebody else's audience. Maybe it's on a podcast, maybe it's on a YouTube, maybe it's at a conference, but you're getting the benefit of their audience because of course you're giving them content you're going to share with your audience, but they are also marketing to theirs and that helps you out a lot. This is where I want to stop and remind you again, I'm giving you a lot of ideas. I'm giving you a lot of options. I don't think you should try all of them. Or if you try all of them, don't make them your pillars. Just have something, one thing in each of these areas that you feel good about and comfortable about and consistent about. And then if you have extra time and energy and you want to try some of the other stuff, then do that. Don't let the fact that I'm giving you a lot of things make you feel overwhelmed. I'm giving you a lot of things because the person who really loves to do speaking engagements might not really want to do blog tours. Like, I write these books all day long. I don't have any writing energy left for blog tours. Or if I do a blog tour, now I don't have energy for my writing. So somebody else might really love putting short stories in anthologies, and somebody else might be like, I don't really write short stories, or I do write short stories, but they're in a different genre. I find mine tends to veer into fantasy or magical realism, which isn't going to attract audience for my crime novels. So there's a lot of things. It's like a buffet. You don't have to take it all. Pick the things that fit for you. Okay, that's my disclaimer. Next slide, please. Street teams. There are a lot of authors who have really good results with street teams. And the street team is a group of readers who are very excited about your book, and they just share it with everybody they know. Nancy Nagel it's a Nancy, Naigle, is amazing with street teams. And she loves dealing with her street team. And these readers are very special to her. She cultivates them carefully. She has a lot of them by now, but she does really special things with them. So she'll do a drawing every month. Maybe one of them gets to have lunch with her in the days when we could actually have lunch together in person. Maybe she would have a special Zoom meeting with that person now to have a virtual Q&A or just time to chat with her. She makes swag just for them. So there's certain swag that she gives to everybody, and there's certain special swag like a pin or a collectible card that only goes to her street team. And it takes a fair amount of money to do this that extremely. And it also takes a fair amount of time, to the point that she actually has one of those members now, just a lot of the wrangling, and then she just engages with them as she can, but she gives them a lot of attention, and they repay it in spades. So if that is something that sounds amazing to you, then you might try street team. If it seems like, oh my gosh, that might be a little too intensive for me, that might not be a good fit for you. But James Rollins, he's a best-selling author. He's got an amazing street team, and he offers some really cool stuff to them that's really specific only to them. You can run a good street team without laying out extra money and making extra swag for them, but you still want them to feel special. And maybe what you'll do is have a Q&A with your team every month, so that they get to, or give them the previews first. Like, here, I have a chapter from this book that I'm working on. Nobody has seen it yet. You get to be the first. So you want to just make them feel special and let them know, like, here's when the book is coming out. And they're on your street team because they love you, and they're committing to helping you promote it when it comes out. Next slide, please. Contests. You gotta be careful with contests, because you get some freebie hunters. So if you offer something in a contest that everybody wants, like $100 Amazon gift card, everybody will want it, whether they like your kind of books or not, because they can go buy whatever kind of book they do like, or they can buy a sewing kit, or they can buy a Justin Bieber t-shirt, whatever they like. So maybe instead you would offer a collection, like a collection of books by 3 or 4 books by somebody else in your genre, or a basket you've made that would appeal only to people who will like your kind of books. Or if you write cat books, maybe it's cat stuff. So here's a cat basket with a book and a mug and a couple of things like that. So tailor your contest prize to people who will actually like your book. And if they're not that type, they'll weed themselves out. One of the big contest sites is, Rafflecopter is one, and King Sumo is one. And you can also run them on Facebook and other places. Goodreads has paid contests, and Library Thing has free contests that you can give. So there's a lot of different places you can do this. And the good thing about Rafflecopter and King Sumo is that they encourage people to share. And it makes sense because if there's a contest and there's only 10 people in it, I have a 1 in 10 chance of winning. But if there's 100 people, I only have a 1 in 100 chance of winning. So I benefit more if there's only a few people in that contest. But with sites like Rafflecopter and King Sumo, you get extra points or extra entries when you share it with people. So I don't understand this part because it's technological, but there's the little bots that keep track of who shared, and they get extra ones. It is Rafflecopter, but it's only one word, like you spelled it. And King Sumo, yes. So people are actually incentivized to share your contest with other people. And when you have the contest, you make sure that you put information in it about yourself and your books. And you can get a lot of readers that way. Now, some writers will keep those people, the contest people, separate on their mailing list until they've proven that they're interested, and they're going to open up your emails and then move them into the regular part of their mailing list. But all of that gets a little bit complicated. The important thing is contests can be a good way to get discovered if you like that kind of thing. Next slide, please. Pinterest. I almost took this out because Pinterest seems to be having a little bit of technical difficulties right now, but it can be a valuable place. I know a lot of authors who do well with that, and it's kind of social media, but it's also kind of not. It's really more of a search engine. And essentially people just pin things, like pinning them on a big community bulletin board, things they like, and they sort them by topic. And then other people will see them and they're excited about it, and sometimes they'll check it out. And a lot of people do buy things from Pinterest. So I would say that if you enjoy just like collecting images and sharing images and scrapbooking and that kind of thing, Pinterest could be a really good opportunity for you. But use a little caution with it, because right now it's getting a little harder to be discovered and also a little harder to find your boards. And it may have something to do with your browser or something like that. So if you do a Pinterest, do a search, book, big email audience. Yeah. If you do a search for book marketing with Pinterest, you'll find some really good articles about it. And also Neil Patel, that's Neil Patel, has an ultimate guide to Pinterest, which is also pretty interesting and good, but you might want to, it is a little techy. Next slide, please. Paid ones are ads, and I think this is the last discovery method that I have here. BookBub, Amazon, Free Booksy, Book Gorilla, Twitter, Amazon, all of these are different ways you can pay. Facebook ads also. You can pay for ads to draw readers to your books. I know authors who swear by BookBub ads in particular. There can be kind of hard to get an Amazon ad, a BookBub ad, but they also have a sponsored ad, little sponsored ad at the bottom that is a lot easier to get. You just buy that one. So there is an author, David Goffran, David G as in Gary, AUGHRAN, who has some very good articles on, and also a book, I think he called it, he has a book on just on BookBub ads, and it's definitely worth reading if you're interested in taking out paid ads. There are also free ones. There are also free areas that aggregate books like that, and you would want to Google some of those, like free book marketing sites. Dave Chesson at Kindlepreneur, it's just Kindle and then the end of entrepreneur, kindlepreneur.com, has got a really good article that's got a list of different ones you can submit to. Some are free, some are paid, some are really inexpensive, and you can check those out. And those are ways you have to try them out a little bit to see what works and tweak. And it sometimes takes a little while to master the whole, what kind of ad will attract my reader. But there are a number of authors who pretty much get their audiences almost entirely through ads. And so that's one way. If you have a little income, it works really well. Big female audience for Pinterest. Yes, exactly. Try book a journal on. That sounds great. Great fan base ads are pretty inexpensive. So those are really good too. Next slide, please. I'm trying to okay, so we're talking about putting it all together, and then we're going to talk about customizing it, and then we'll do a step-by-step. I'm trying to, and I want to leave room for questions as we go. So next slide, please. We're going to put it all together. And the first question to consider is, where are you in this journey? Because where you are in your career is going to influence what you choose. Next slide, please. If you're pre-published, for example, and you don't have a book to sell yet, but you want to lay the foundation for it, you're interested in looking professional and networking and building connections. Those connections are really important. And you want to connect with publishing professionals, with other authors, readers, groups of readers, librarians, journals, all the people. And you're beginning to build a platform. And so one of the things you want to ask is, do you have special skills or an expertise in any area related to your book? You can start leveraging it. Or if what you know is, I'm writing thrillers and my audience loves thrillers, can I do content that those people are going to like? The challenge at that level is, what do I write about? I don't have a book out yet, so I'm not really pitching myself as an author yet. But maybe if I know, let's say I write kind of dark thrillers, I know that audience tends to like crime stuff. So maybe I do a crime, maybe let's say I'll put a true crime story or an unsolved crime or a new forensic thing, or a review of other thrillers. JT Ellison, Hank talked about her earlier, and JT is amazing. And one of the things she did was that she did, I don't know if she did it every month or every week. I think she did it every week. She had a list of the top thrillers that she chose for that week. And her readers, she attracted thousands of readers who tuned into her every week because they wanted to know who those top 10 mystery writers were. Who was going to, what thrillers were going to be top of the heap that day. It was not by author, it was by a book. And so readers are interested in new books to read, and they loved it. She had it on a blog, and every week she updated it with that. And it was a big part of how she built her audience. I get a newsletter from an author who lives in Alaska, and every time she showcases a crime, usually murder that took place in Alaska. Fascinating. So think about, what does my list of potential readers, what are my potential readers, what are they interested in? And then write about those things. And then you can have a place on your website that kind of talks about your books. And as you engage with them, you're already got a commonality. And when you do have a book ready, you have an audience of people many of whom will be interested in getting that book and in supporting you because you're already got a connection with them. All right, next slide, please. Are you just launching or just newly launched? Well, you want to network and build connections. You want to build your email list, right? You want to attract and engage readers. So you're doing a lot of the same things that you were as a pre-published author, but now you have a book. And the question is, how do I get heard above the competition? That's a hard one because there's a lot of authors out there. And one thing is continuing to give them information that they like and entertainment that they like and targeting things to them. The hardest thing for us sometimes to remember is it's not about us, it's about them. And so my purpose might be to sell books, but they don't care about that. We all want one of our first questions is, even if you're altruistic, even if we're wonderful people, we do think a lot about what's in this for me. So if you're continuing to offer them things that interest them and engagement in things that are interesting to them, they keep wanting to come back. And if you're consistent, you're already going to be way ahead of somebody who's not. If they know that every week they're going to get this from you, or every month they're going to get this from you, or every quarter they're going to get a great newsletter from you, they're going to be more likely to stick with you and to recommend you to other people than if it kind of haphazard. Next slide, please. And then if you're already published and you already have a following, you're interested in maintaining your current connections and building new ones. You want to keep building that list. You want to engage with your current readers. You want to attract new readers. And the challenge is, how do I break through to the next level? And that can be the hardest thing, because there is a certain amount of lightning striking to this whole what takes off and what doesn't. So if you look at a number of books that just take off, sometimes the question is, how did that ever happen? Why did they pick that book to make a million seller? And so sometimes it's lightning striking, but I have this theory that if you want to be struck by lightning, you have to stand out in the rain. And then sometimes you have to get yourself a lightning rod or an umbrella or something to attract the lightning. And then you just keep doing the work and gradually work your way up. Where does this email list come from? The email list is when you had, when you set up your website, you set up a place to get their email addresses. And you either attract them with this kind of bare bones for updates or for contests or for fun stuff, more fun stuff, sign up for my email list, or you have something you offer them, a short story, a dossier, a novella, a map. Like if you write fantasy, readers love maps. So you can download this map. It's something special they only get by being on your email list. And they say they trade you their email address for this thing. And then gradually you build up to that. How do you attract people? Use some of those discovery methods, contests, email swaps, etc. When you go to a book signing, most times people will have a sign up sheet so people can give you their emails. You have to hang on to that because the laws are such you're not really allowed to put people on your email lists without their permission. And so you want to have that documentation. These people came to this book signing and they signed this and they said they wanted this. So you keep that in your file. So if there's ever a question, you have the proof that they signed up. But that's where that email list comes from. You gradually build it over time. And it comes once they've discovered who you are and they want to know a little bit more about you, they will then hopefully add themselves to your newsletter email list. Does that make sense? Hope. All right, next slide. So when you're deciding these things, you want to consider your preferences, your strengths, and your weaknesses. Are you introverted? Are you extroverted? Do you love speaking? Do you hate it? If you have a blog that's your own, will you have enough energy to do your own writing? Or do you just want to do guest blogging on somebody else's? Or do you not want to blog at all? Do you have a lot of energy or low energy? I know I have a very dear friend who has Epstein-Barr fibromyalgia, and she really has to parse out the time she has. And so she has only a certain amount of day that she can spend on marketing and still have time for writing and still do all the other things she has to do. So she can't do something that's going to demand a lot of her energy. Does one of the social media platforms appeal to you especially? Are there any that you hate? If you really dislike a social media, you're probably not going to spend a lot of time on it. So don't pick that. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? I also like to suggest that in terms of social media, you pick one. If you do social media at all, you pick one that's going to be your main pillar. And then you have a profile on the other ones and you post on it just enough that if people look, it doesn't look empty. So maybe I'll do a few tweets or share a few tweets, or once a month I'll tweet to somebody, because Twitter is not my pillar. But I do mostly Facebook. And then you would put in your bio, you would say, hey, I love seeing all my readers. I really, if you want to hang out with me, I hang out on Facebook, or I hang out mostly on Instagram. And that way you have a presence for readers who only use that particular social media, because readers will tend to look on the social media that they like. And so, and yet there's so many social medias that it's hard to try to do all of them. So the compromise I like, if you can do this, is that I have one that I mostly do things on, and then the other one just would have something that directs people to where you like to be, so they can find you, and then they know where they can really follow you. Or, hey, I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter, but if you want to join my email list, you will, you can get these updates and this and this and that. And I like to engage with my readers through my email list. So just having the presence and also getting that name so that nobody else can use it, it can be valuable. Next slide, please. And now you have the little 10-step program, which is all the things we just talked about. And then we're going to have questions. So the first thing is you plan and you create your website. And you can get these slides. I'm fine with them sending to you, so you don't have to worry about copying everything down all at once. You plan and create the website. You plan and create your reader magnet if you're going to have one. And if not, you figure out what are you going to say to entice them to sign up. You plan and create your little email sequence. What are you going to say to them? And once they're on, you plan your discovery method, you plan your interaction method, you make sure all the conversion elements are in place. If you have a book out, then you figure out, how am I going to tell if this is working out? And once all that's in place, and once you have your interaction plan in place and everything is set up so that you're ready for all the people to come, then you start your discovery plan. So it looks like a lot, but it's really mostly just planning. It's basically, let's plan, let's get our website together and our magnet. Let's pick one way of being discovered, one way of interacting, and then we're done. So, question times. Is it, go ahead and say the next slide, please. Yes, this is just a place where you ask me questions, and here's my email address if you want to email me. And then this is a part of the book marketing course. It's the overview basically. And the people who take the course would just do a deeper dive. It's where when I said, let's try all of these things and see what you like, that's basically what the class is. And if you don't want to try it, at least you hear enough about it to go, oh, I definitely don't want that. Or yeah, I definitely want that. And I also have, this is on the Triangle page. There's a group on Facebook called Spirit of Ink. And it's just a Facebook group for writers. And every Friday we do a sharing time. And every Monday I do a training kind of like this. And then there's calls for submissions and various things that I think will be interesting to writers. And you are very welcome to come and ask to join it. Thank you, Amy. I'm glad you enjoy Spirit of Ink. A couple of people from that are on here now. And all you have to do is agree to be nice to people, don't show your book, and no politics and religion, no arguing. So question time.
Hi, Beth. I think you've done a really great job, especially keeping up with the questions as they came in. So, so if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat right now, and we'll get to those as they come through. Someone just wrote that they still don't understand magnet.
All right. So a reader magnet is an enticement to get people to give you their email address. Now, once upon a time, that wasn't really an issue. It was just, I really love Stephen King. I get to be on his email list and he's going to send me a newsletter. It was very exciting. But now that so many authors have email lists and newsletters, it's a little bit less compelling to want to be on that list, because you know that your email box gets full. And so what a lot of writers will do is have a reader magnet. The magnet is an attractor. So it's something that you give to the reader in exchange for their email address. So send me your email address and I will send you this dossier of my spy. Send me this email, send me your email address and I will send you a short story or a novella that's related to my series, or I'll enter you in this contest, or I will give you this map of my world, or I'll give you this map that nobody else sees about a secret little part of my world. So the idea of the magnet, it's just an enticement to say, you can give me your email address and you will get something in return to it that is that is of value.
Okay. Diane Kelly wants to know if there's anything you think is just a total waste of money.
Is anything a total waste of money? I always hate to answer questions like that because the answer is almost always, it depends. I would say that a waste of money. I've done ads that I haven't gotten any response to at all, but I feel like I might have if I'd had more money to throw at it, or more opportunity. Like if I'd had enough money to do good split testing, I might have eventually. So in a lot of ways, I wish I could answer that, but I feel like there's so many things that have some value for some people and not for others, or that they might be valuable if you had more time to spend on it to get to know it more, or they might be if you had more money to spend in the first place. I think courses can be very valuable, obviously, because I teach some. I think they can also be of less value. So I think more it's a question of doing some research up front, see, have other people had success with it? Does it seem like it's going to be a good fit for you? Does it seem like something you'll be able to do consistently? If you have a specific question about a specific thing, maybe you could email it to me. But in terms of answering it generally, I'm afraid I would be saying something that's not, I would be saying something that you would generalize that probably shouldn't be.
Linda Shell wants to know if you could suggest examples of prizes that can be given out for a contest.
All right. So if I have, all right, I have a cozy novel. It is very different from my PI novels, and it is part of a multi-author collection. It's a multi-author series, and it's about a cat detective. And so one of the things I could do would be, right, if I wanted to offer something for a contest that was fairly pricey, you could offer a Kindle with all the other authors' books on it, with the Trouble books on it, or one of the Trouble books on it. Or you could, if you don't want to go that direction, you could offer a boxed set of the Trouble books. Or I could offer, even though these may not be mystery readers, cat lovers, because a lot of people, they don't read much, but they love everything with cats on it. So maybe I would offer a basket with a cat mug and a little cat necklace and a little cat, like a little picture book about, not picture book, a little photo book about cats, or something like that. So I could do those things for a contest. I have horses in my Jared book, and so I do a horse throw, or a couple of things related to horses. You can give your own book away, but I don't advise that too much, because then a lot of people won't buy it because they could get it. But you could offer, like the first book in your series, if you have a series, you could offer that. You can offer other authors' books who are in your genre.
Okay.
Just some things like that. Think, what would your readers really love to have that other people wouldn't want?
Okay, thanks. Millie Edson asks, but we're not supposed to ask for their email addresses and add them. They need to add themselves on our website. I think she's asking for clarification.
Yes, they do need to add themselves on your website. You can't just randomly do that, because you can get in big trouble nowadays. You can add them manually if you have their permission and can prove you have their permission, which is why a lot of authors at book signings will have a notebook and it will say, if you would like to sign up for my email list, put your name and your email here. And then you can do that, but you have to say, you really have to save that paper. And I would date it and all that other stuff so that you, if somebody comes back and says, I didn't sign up for that, and the big email powers that be come at you for it, you can say, oh no, I do have this. Here is the paper here's a picture of the paper that shows that they actually signed up for it. But yes, you cannot, they really tightened up those laws about adding people yourself to your newsletter. Now people do it. I get all kind of author newsletters from people that I just happened to email, and then I end up getting their email letters. I don't complain about those things, and I usually don't even unsubscribe, but some people get really bent out of shape, and you can get in some bad trouble with the powers that be.
Okay, that's great. I think that's all through the chat. Let me just quickly look at the Q&A section.
Oh, Jasmine had a really good point. I once won a signed postcard of the cover of a book, and I adore it. It's the little things. It really is. I got one of the nicest emails I ever got was from a guy in Wisconsin who had read Taste of Blood and Ashes. He said, I love this book. Would you please send me a book plate so I can put it in and treasure it forever? And I was like, I will go make some.
I guess, can we put up the slide with the email address one more time? Oh, it's up there.
I don't think the email address, it's Jaden, Jaden at jadenterrell.com. There it is.
And just to reiterate that all of these slides will be on the website later on. So just keep checking back to the website, hopefully later on today. And we'll put those out there so you can relive the moment.
Thank you. The main thing to keep in mind for all this is that know yourself and what you can and or what you are willing to do, because you're always going to hear, you got to do this, you really don't got to do any of it. But if you want to make a career, do have the basics in place. And then choose one thing at a time. Don't try to do everything that we talked about. Just pick one thing and really do it consistently and give it enough time to see if it's going to work for you. And if it does, just the main rules, do more of what's working for you and do less of what's not. And you can make it really complicated and try not to do that, because that will be very overwhelming.
Yeah. Great advice, Beth. Thank you so much. This has just been wonderful.
Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, clap, clap, clap. So we're all going to spend the afternoon, let's see, rereading our first line and looking at all our characters, not describing them by how they look, but their actions. And now we're going to look at our foundation. And it has been such a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and for attending our Learn from the Best workshop. Thank you to Andy, Abby Vandiver, Hank Phillippi Ryan, and last but not least to you, Beth or Jaden Terrell. It's been a great day, everyone. Write well and stay well.